Ladies, gentlemen, fellow boys, soups out there, welcome to my breakdown, review, and recap of The Boys Season 4, Episode 4. And today, as in pure boys fashion, we're in for a bit of a nuts one, thanks to not just what Homelander got up to this episode. There was quite a few things, especially with Butcher, and what I would like to call the tadpole from Baldur's Gate 3 floating in his mind. Of course, we have Sister Sage's plan ramping up with how she's using Firecracker, and many other things we absolutely have to get to in this breakdown. So guys, I want to know any thoughts, any theories down in the comments below, any expansion on my thoughts. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me. Go ahead and like this video if you do want to see me cover more boys videos just like this week in, week out. But at the beginning, guys, as we know, at the end of last episode, Homelander, after having a go at Ryan, which reminds me, no Ryan this week, barely any Neuman as well. But as of the end of last week's episode, of course, we had Homelander somewhat talking to the various versions of himself, and he needed to somewhat shred his humanity, because there is a little bit left with regards to how he has this need for love. He wants to go back to the lab that he grew up in, of which he suffered many a trauma, of which we get into in this episode, and in where we still have scientists working there today. And the main people that he recognizes is Marty and Frank. And my God, does he put them through a lot of what he went through as a kid. There is also Barbara, of which we'll get to towards the end of this breakdown. But for the time being, it looks like he was just going to put Marty and Frank through the ringer. And, you know, I did think, as much as I really enjoyed this, I have to say Anthony Starr was absolutely incredible with the very maniacal scenes that he gets in. It honestly, I know people were saying it since the trailer, but that one moment in where he was getting, was it Frank? No, it was Marty, to do things to himself, kind of have to skirt around quite a bit here with the YouTube guidelines. But that laugh he was doing, as much as I don't want to be like everyone else saying, oh, he'd be a great Reverse Flash, or he'd be a great this, he kind of would be a sick Joker, because my God, he was really losing it in his maniacal laughter among how much sadistic pleasure he was getting out of this. But as I was saying, as much as I really enjoyed this, I thought we were going to get just a little bit more flashbacks to mini Homelander. What we saw instead was literal kind of flashes to the long-haired child version of Homelander rather than actual scenes. I feel like towards the end of last episode, where you saw flashes of the red door, you saw Barbara walking towards the red door, I thought maybe we'd get a scene of Barbara in the Red Room, for example, but instead they decided to shy away from that. And I'm not saying like witnessing scenes of mini Homelander getting tortured, even though they obviously showed flashes of him in the furnace or the oven or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know. I thought maybe we would have like an interview or things like that. Maybe that was just an expectation of mine. We did kind of get some more information out of it, understanding what Homelander went through. I mean, we kind of knew a bit of this from prior seasons anyway about his upbringing, but seeing it materialize with him actually facing characters from his past was super intriguing. And there was even little extras in the scenes as well, such as early Homelander designs on the wall, various photos of Homelander as a kid. You can obviously, as I said at the end of my last review, despite who Homelander is and not condoning anything he's doing, you can empathize with him to an extent, because if this didn't happen to him when he was being raised, then maybe he wouldn't have ended up the same way. Although, to be fair, Barbara said later on that when he was being given birth to, he basically burst through the guts from the inside out, levitating with his umbilical cord still attached, and killed the 3 doctors with his little baby heat vision eyes, I guess. So maybe he was always destined for darkness. I don't know. Obviously, I can talk about this for quite a bit longer, go into detail about what he then made Marty do with regards to the nickname Squirt, but I mean, I think it speaks for itself. All I can say is that Anthony Starr was absolutely fantastic. New camera angles were made through the holes of lasers through people's bodies, and I think I'll probably just end it there. Other than when Barbara told him to stop and then they went into the Red Room. But after that initial scene, in this moment as well, we got a couple of TV adverts, one referencing Gen V with the Godolphin 4 Campus Revenge, and this kind of got me thinking, I wonder when we are going to see them, because we did see them in the trailer. I believe they were in the Vought Tower with other members of the Seven, so I'm super intrigued as to what part they're going to have to play into this story with regards to Sage's plans. Let me know if you have any theories there for Sam or Kate. But this is when we got a bit more of Starlight's storyline, because we had Bob Singer watching the news about his anti-superhero legislation, and Starlight arrives offering her somewhat valuable side of things, with the Starlight is saying that if she kind of rallies towards him, maybe even comes back in a super suit, it really might help things out with votes, I guess. And, you know, if he makes sure that Vought goes to the ground, then she will absolutely help him. Because it is a bit of a battle, because on the news they were kind of ridiculing Bob Singer, because after all, a lot of the home teamers like the idea of soups and are probably all for the soup-dominated world that Sage and Homelander are planning to bring. And this is all a part of Sister Sage's plan, or as she puts it, the first pebble down the mountain of causing the kind of public chaos, and that is knocking out Starlight. So she talks about this game plan with regards to flooding everywhere with anti-Starlight content, to the point of getting the algorithm to blast articles out there in where, you know, maybe around up to 100 million people will be outraged by Starlight for really kind of no reason other than, and I think obviously, you know, the boys being very political, there's always some kind of larger commentary going on here. And I think this is just speaking to how if you do get enough articles like this in real life, and I experienced this myself, even on like a completely unrelated level. For example here, like random analogy, if there's a superhero headline or something like the Batman 2 is cancelled or something like this, then people won't read the actual body of the article. They won't do their own due diligence. They read the headline and they're like, oh, James Gunn is tampering with this. And this is causing a lot of kind of bickering online, a lot of discourse, saying this season is being even more on the nose, or pointing out things even more on either side of the camp. And I will agree that maybe it has stepped it up a notch there with the kind of satirical piss-taking of like real-life politics and the extremes of both sides, sometimes getting hyperbolic, but the irony being sometimes real life on both sides of the spectrum can be insanely and unbelievably hyperbolic. But the thing that I also agree with is that they have been doing this since season 1. Like, truly. Like, it's always been on the surface there. I think things are just stepping up in reflection of how things are stepping up with the characters. Like, obviously, Homelander wanting a freaking soup dictatorship and kind of being done to the point of killing somebody in public last season. Well, obviously, things are stepping up even more with the satirical, political piss-taking that is taking place. So it's interesting watching that, commentary happen online. But I would love to know if you guys have any thoughts on that. Back on point, one of the ways that Sage is starting this pebble falling down the mountain, if you will, is through giving Firecracker her very own show, Truth Bomb, being set up right opposite Starlight's building. And this was around the time that I guess Starlight was about to make an announcement, and I'm guessing that announcement was going to be about maybe her return in a costume or like endorsing whatever with regards to Bob Singer and their conversation previously, but this is when it turned into something else entirely. So this was kind of the mission with MM and Butcher and a few of the boys this episode. Well, of course, Billy wants to get some dirt on Firecracker, and obviously this only really aids the whole fight of what's going on in the public, because MM has been onto Sister Sage and her plans and recruiting Firecracker and how this is all on the behalf of Homelander. So they were getting to work. But this is where we have Billy and MM confront Firecracker about her past, and yeah, it's a very messed up past. Again, I have to skirt around this, but when she was 28 at Bible camp, well, let's just say that she knew a boy who was only 15, and they were threatening to expose her because they have video evidence, and they were going to tweet it out there because obviously with her rallying at TruthCon and everything to people saying, oh, this person is, one of those people, or Tom Hanks, and look what's going on with Oprah, and what's going on there, and lo and behold, what would people think of her in her own audience if she was one of those people as well? Well, it turned out that she just sent it herself, and I guess her audience don't particularly care, because I guess the underlying message with that is, the ironic thing is, the people who kind of talk about all of these tinfoil hat theories or accusations of people being like who Firecracker is with her past, maybe they have very own dark things in their past, and they are seeking some kind of repent or salvation or whatever it is, because this is where, of course, we had Ezekiel on stage, and she speaks to everyone and she talks about being born again. And this is where she actually turns it around on Starlight with her first save, in how it is based on truth here, and where when she was still learning to control her powers, on that first save of her, she ended up blinding a mother of 3 kids. So the thing that was happening with Annie along the way here is that she was getting more and more and more to the boiling point. And meanwhile, with Huey this episode, he arranges a meet with A-Train because obviously his father is now at the point of where they're going to switch off his life support, and he can't quite, come to terms with that. So he's thinking, hey, maybe I can get some compound V, and I can save him that way. So this is where he brings Kimiko along as well for a bit of muscle. A-Train's a bit like, dude, I've already got Sister Sage watching me, and that is something interesting that we're going to talk about in just a second. But before we find out what happens with Huey's dad, this is where things get a bit crazy between Kimiko and Huey, because they have to fight for their lives, because we have some members of Shining Light try and kill them, and especially that one girl that Kimiko encountered last episode. I have to say, Huey definitely had his moment to shine here, because, he had like a freaking sprained or broken ankle, and he didn't have any temp V to handle this situation, yet he had basically like his own little sword and shield with like a Stanley blade knife, and I don't know what his shield was, but it was like a side of a locker or something, and he managed to hold his own. So fair play, Huey. It also just kind of demonstrated how far or how lost Huey has got from the previous version of himself. It was quite savage what he pulled off when defeating that Shining Light member. But we also had it revealed with regards to Kimiko's personal story that when she was facing off against the girl from last episode in this moment, well, she revealed, like, don't you remember? You offered me an ice cream. Basically, she basically forcibly recruited her into Shining Light, took her there into the fight pits or whatever, forcing her to fight, and, basically put her into that life. Kimiko escaped at some point, and she was just left behind. So I still think this is going to go into, I could be wrong, perhaps a bit of a fairly predictable direction. Maybe she's going to help try and make up for what she did in the past, if that's even possible, through getting her out of there. And this somewhat parallels Frenchie's storyline, of course, because Frenchie obviously did something very bad in the past, and he's trying to have to deal with that in present day, and he feels awful about it. And now we have Kimiko having to deal with something she did in the past. How do each of them even begin to make up for that in their own situations? And this is where we got that scene with A-Train in Homelander's apartment. He spots the gray hair. He finds a hidden refrigerator, and it's like, oh, is the compound V in there? Oh, no, it's just refrigerated, bottled milk. And then there was another one with the compound V in it. But it turns out that Ashley was here, and the only reason, as far as we're aware, when we had A-Train check, is to leave a floater in Homelander's toilet to clap back. Now, I just don't know if she's meant to be a very stupid character, but, I just find it very strange that she was too scared to retire after witnessing that worker getting her head lasered, yet she's ballsy enough to go into Homelander's own apartment and shite in his toilet. Like, I make it make sense, but maybe it's not meant to make sense because she's just stupid. So they have a bit of a situation in where they're not going to tell on each other maybe, but this is the interesting thing. Surely Homelander is going to notice that that compound V is missing. And this revisits that conversation we had in the previous review with how A-Train is very much so skating on thin ice here. Now he's got two more things to worry about in addition to Sage just kind of taking an extra look at him already, and that is the missing compound V and bloody Ashley, of all people, because you just know that Ashley will, dob him in as soon as she gets the chance, but maybe she won't, because he can just be like, well, yeah, she shat in your toilet, man. But I think Homelander would be a bit more concerned about the compound V going missing. So I do think that A-Train will be a death this season. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know how much longer he is going to last. But this is where we now revisit Firecracker continuing to go on after Starlight, showing her medical records, displaying her having an abortion 6 months ago. And as you guys know, this gets Annie very, very triggered, and she marches out there. She seems to have absolutely mastered the superhero landing now compared to being all over the place previously, but obviously she had absolute conviction going after Firecracker in this moment. And the thing is, she's giving Firecracker exactly what she wants. She smacks the living crap out of her. This is being recorded on social media, on the news. And even though I totally understand how mad this must make Annie, I was kind of like, no, you must know what they're doing. I just felt like this was, I don't know, this is a bit of a difficult thing because obviously what was exposed on TV is incomprehensible how that would make you feel. So, some people I can completely understand would get so mad to the point of doing what Starlight did. And yet I did feel at the same time, is this being done so it can further the storyline along with making Starlight herself the figurehead of the Starlighter movement to look exactly like what they're painting them out to be? Now you have Starlight herself looking very savage and very brutal. It's just going to inflame that even more. And I felt like, to be honest, as mad as this would make you, would Starlight have really have done that? With it being such a transparent play? I don't know. I don't know. I was a bit iffy on it because I was like, come on, like, really, Annie, are you going to do that? I get it, but how are you going to get out of this one now? Like, truly, you've just given them everything that they want. And to me, it was like the most transparent play of cards from the opposite side, is wounding as it was to Annie at the same time. So let me know what you guys think. It's not so much of a, do I blame Annie for doing that? No, not really. But should she have done that when it was so obvious as to why they were getting her to do that? But this is where we also get Frenchie being caught in Firecracker's trailer, but Ezekiel starts attacking him. Butcher saves him with a bit of liquid nitrogen, but he ends up getting overpowered. And this is where his little worm in his head, the tadpole, starts screaming as he gets choked out. And this is when the screen cuts to black. You hear Ezekiel screaming, and it's kind of like the worm, the tadpole, came out of his eye. But we know it's like only this, like barely this big. So does it just have the ability to grow big? I don't know. It's like a little soup worm freaking symbiote thing that clearly munched on Ezekiel, I think. I mean, you could argue that it gave Billy temporary kind of compound V powers to absolutely dismember this guy, but it seemed to me that the worm made its way out of his eye, munched on Ezekiel, and then I guess popped himself back in, and temporarily in that time we have Billy go into a bit of a dark urge period and black out, and so he doesn't really remember what happened. But again, I am very much so intrigued by this. Another thing that reminds me of that tadpole that Billy has is that I swear when anyone gets injected with compound V, they have that little ripple going down the skin. Now, I'm not saying everyone who gets injected with compound V has a little worm inside them, but it's very reminiscent of that. And so is Billy's own situation here, or ability for compound V, of which they think is cancer, just isolated in this little creature that is protective of its master? Because again, even though it appears that he's dying, the little creature doesn't want him to die because it just saved him in that moment. So would he really die? This is where A-Train gives Huey the compound V, and Huey finally says to A-Train that they're good. Again, not quite forgiving, but you You don't have to owe me anything anymore. But Butcher was watching the whole time, just like, why would you do that? And this is where we actually learn from Butcher that he's already tried using Compound V to cure himself of the cancer. But it didn't seem to work. If anything, it moved up his due date, if you will, of dying. But I think the reason why it might not have worked is because whatever this little tadpole is, clearly if it has the ability to come out and kill Ezekiel and be that powerful, it's like a living manifestation of the Compound V itself. So maybe just injecting himself with Compound V didn't work because in a way, Billy kind of has Compound V in him, but from the Temp V, kind of creating this living V snake. I guess you would call the tadpole, if it had a name, like V. And just as Huey decides that he can't give Compound V to his dad, he goes to get a coffee, but when he returns back, you see that in the IV drip, or whatever it is, there's some blue going throughout it. So you have to think that Huey's mum gave Huey's dad Compound V since she works for Vought, as we know, and maybe after seeing how hard her son was taking this situation, and also somewhat rekindling a little bit of a relationship there in the first 3 episodes, with Huey coming to learn a little bit more about her past, she wanted to give that to him. So you have to think that's going to be the reveal. And also what's going to come out of this is, hey, Huey's dad is going to be a soup now. And that's going to be something entertaining in the episodes to come for sure as well. So I'm looking forward to that. And the last things that I have to talk about now is really just Homelander in the Red Room. We did see him with Barbara, and Barbara was really kind of digging it in there. She even said, and this is something that almost rubs it in even more with regards to the torture that he endured as a child, that you could have broken out here anytime you wanted. We couldn't have stopped you, but you didn't, because you couldn't stand the idea that we would be disappointed in you. And that obviously circles back to, like, why would you care about people being disappointed in you unless, guess what? You cared. You wanted their approval. You wanted their love. And this is where she even reveals that your need for approval, and love, Vought brought in the best psychologists in the world and developed the protocol to carefully engineer that need so you'd be obedient. And in many ways, that was their greatest success, she says. So, his love is so deep, it's so human, and he'll never be able to overcome that. So the notes that I kind of have as he was leaving in the elevator, all bloodied here, was that, has he actually shed his humanity? That was the purpose he went there for. And my God, as he's leaving in the elevator all bloodied, we cut back to Barbara in the Red Room. Interesting that she's still alive, but maybe he kind of wanted to leave her with that haunting, visual. But it's full of dismembered scientists. He must have decimated every single one of them. But I wouldn't be surprised if, again, that psychology that was deliberately injected into him to develop a need for approval and love and everything, I don't know if he would have kicked that. I do wonder if Barbara will be in the picture even more because, again, he could have left her alive to just kind of have her live with that and be a constant reminder of, look what you did to me and look what I've now done to all of these people, even though Barbara also viewed them as just doing their jobs. But she did seem to have a little bit of a hold on him in some way. She still spoke to him with confidence, and Homelander still seemed to listen because there was a bit of that almost relationship of this hierarchy that they had when he was a kid and she was, well, I guess a scientist experimenting on him. But he was smiling and seemed a little bit relieved, as if he had shaken something off in the elevator. So the question is, has he? And whether he thinks he has or not, I'm sure we're going to get a Homelander from here on out who feels, at least temporarily, that he can let himself go and be a little bit more loose from here on out. And that can be, maybe, well, it will be disastrous. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my thoughts and rambly speculation and breakdown on The Boys Season 4, Episode 4. All that's left to do is to leave the floor to you guys now. What did you think of this episode? What do you think of what's happening with Firecracker and Starlight? What do you think, Powers frickin' Huey's dad is gonna have, what do you think's going on with Butcher's frickin' Baldur's Gate tadpole, and of course, any theories and speculation surrounding the future of Homelander this season. If you enjoyed this video, would really appreciate a like. Consider subscribing for more videos on The Boys. But until next time, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow soups and boys in the next video. Goodbye.